I recently purchased a 2015 15-inch MacBook Pro for video editing in 2019 for less than $1,000. Was the purchase worth it? Are the specs good enough in 2019? And how does it compare to the latest generation of MacBook Pros? Let's find out. Let's start the video by discussing the configuration options. For the processor, there exists a 2.2 GHz quad-core Intel Core i7-4770HQ that turbo boosts up to 3.4 GHz, a 2.5 GHz quad-core Intel Core i7-4870HQ that turbo boosts up to 4.0 GHz, and a 2.8 GHz 4980HQ quad-core Intel Core i7 that turbo boosts up to 4.0 GHz. I recommend getting the 2.5 or 2.8 GHz options as these both come with dedicated GPUs. Speaking of the dedicated GPU, the 2.2 GHz option above only comes with the Intel Iris Pro graphics, which, as I said, I don't recommend. The 2.5 and 2.8 GHz options come with the Intel Iris Pro graphics and the AMD Radeon R9 M370X with 2 GB of memory. Please be aware that if you are searching for this laptop, sometimes only the Intel Iris Pro graphics will show up in About This Mac. You need to look in System Report and Graphics/Displays to verify that the laptop has the M370X. The laptop comes with 16 GB of 1600 MHz DDR3 RAM, as well as easily upgradable 256 GB, 512 GB, or 1 TB of PCIe-based flash storage. In my opinion, since this is such a great laptop, it is harder to find. Apple doesn't have any refurbished models for sale at this time, and Amazon only has the 2014 version with the NVIDIA GeForce GT 750M for $1,200. Therefore, you'll have to search eBay, Craigslist, and Facebook Marketplace. I found mine on Craigslist for $880, and you can find them on eBay from $900 to $1,600, depending on the storage capacity. Mine came with only 256 GB of storage, which I immediately upgraded to 1 TB of genuine Apple SSD. 256 GB should be fine for most people, but if, like me, you want to use this laptop for video editing, I highly recommend the upgrade. Hit that like button and let me know in the comments below if you want to see a video dedicated solely to how well this MacBook edits 4K video in Final Cut Pro. The cheapest 2019 MacBook Pro 15 starts at a whopping $2,250, which gets you an improved 2.6 GHz 6-core 9th generation Intel Core i7 and Radeon Pro 555X, but not a big improvement in RAM and storage, which still has 16 GB of DDR4 memory and 256 GB of SSD storage. If you've been watching my videos, you know I love Apple's older generation scissor keys included in this generation of MacBook. The ergonomics for this keyboard are great. I've always loved the amount of force required to press each key, so there is no learning curve. The 1.4 millimeters of key travel just feels premium in comparison to recent MacBooks that include Apple's first, second, third, and fourth generation of butterfly keys. Therefore, compared to the 2019 MacBook Pros, this keyboard is much more comfortable to type on for me. Additionally, the keyboard included in this MacBook does not break by a piece of dust. Regarding the trackpads, the 2015 MacBook Pro includes Apple's latest generation glass trackpad with Force Touch and simulated click. This is the same trackpad that exists in the 2019 MacBook Pro, albeit slightly smaller. It feels very premium and is better than any Windows or Chrome OS laptop. It just feels very sensitive to the touch. As I've said in my previous MacBook videos, it feels like Apple took the sensitivity from the iPhone touchscreen and implemented it into their trackpads. Rolling my finger along the trackpad consistently registers fine mouse movements, which doesn't happen on Windows laptops. The Force Touch capability is fine if you're into that sort of thing, but I've never found a good use for it though. What do you use it for? The simulated click feels very premium as well. Now, all sides of the trackpad require the same amount of force to register a click. If you use tap to click like I do, this trackpad might convert you to start physically clicking. Finally, I like the size of this trackpad. It is large, but smaller than the trackpad in the 2019 MacBook Pro. Therefore, my palms never rest on the trackpad while I'm typing on the keyboard, and I don't have to rely on some type of palm rejection to mostly filter out false mouse movements and clicks. Now let's talk about the ports. The 15-inch MacBook Pro includes an outstanding selection of them. You will get an SD card slot, an HDMI port, 2 USB 3 ports with speeds up to 5 gigabits per second, 2 Thunderbolt 2 ports with speeds up to 20 gigabits per second, a MagSafe 2 power port, and a 3.5mm headphone jack. It's a shame that I have to talk about the headphone jack like it's a plus. Compared to the 2019 MacBook Pros 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports, I prefer having a larger port selection than what is currently offered by Apple, even though the ports on the 2015 MacBook Pro aren't as fast as the Thunderbolt 3's 40 gigabits per second speeds. For what I'm doing, the transfer speeds are just fine. For example, during video editing, it is very convenient to simply insert my SD card without having to go find an adapter, and it's not like a Thunderbolt 3 port is going to make the read and write speeds on my SD card any faster. Regarding the sound, the stereo speakers in this MacBook sound just as good as the stereo speakers in this generation of 15-inch MacBook Pros. To me, the 15-inch MacBook Pros produce the best sound when compared to the smaller 13 and 12-inch versions due to their larger size. But if you want the best quality in sound, I recommend using headphones in the 3.5mm headphone jack or Apple's Airpods. They pair super easily with the MacBook Pro, and I highly recommend them. See a link down in the description below. Now let's talk about the size and weight. The 2015 15-inch MacBook Pro is 4.5 pounds. It is heavier than the current 4 pounds 2019 15-inch MacBook Pros due to its larger 14.1 by 9.7 inch dimensions. When compared to the 13-inch alternatives, you feel the weight when you are carrying it, but it is no worse than many heavy-duty laptops. That said, due to the weight, the fan rubbed up against the back panel multiple times when I was carrying the laptop when the fans were still on. The thickness is 0.7 inches all around, and it doesn't taper like the MacBook Air. On the plus side, due to its large size, the multitasking on this laptop is awesome. I'm excited to see what Apple does in the future with their 16-inch screen fitting in the same size chassis. Continuing with the screen, the 15.4-inch IPS panel has a native resolution of 2880 by 1800. That's 220 pixels per inch. Text is super crisp, the color accuracy is great, and the viewing angles are amazing as well. If you want the highest quality in screen, then look no further. The screen in this 2015 15-inch MacBook Pro is comparable to the 2019 15-inch MacBook Pros. Regarding the battery, Apple claims 9 hours. I get closer to 8 to 8.5, and your mileage may vary depending on what you are doing. Although the 2019 15-inch MacBook Pro is rated for 10 hours, this kind of battery life in here is unheard of in mostly all the powerful Windows laptops. You can't go wrong with any MacBook if you care about battery life. What about the longevity of the battery? Should you buy a 4-year-old laptop and expect it to still have excellent battery? The answer is yes. I guess most people leave their heavier 15-inch MacBook Pros plugged in at all times because my 4-year-old laptop had only 160 cycles on it when I purchased it. Since it's rated for over 1,000 cycles, the battery should last for over another decade. Even if the battery has gone through that many cycles, you can still replace it. Unlike Apple's latest generation of MacBooks, the MacBook Pro 2015 still can be easily upgraded. You have the ability to replace the SSD and the battery. You can even replace the keyboard keys if you're having issues with them, like them being too mushy. That said, you shouldn't have a problem with the keys on this laptop because they aren't butterfly keys. Regarding the hard drive, Apple uses a proprietary SSD. Third-party manufacturers make the SSD and adapters, but all of these options tend to reduce the MacBook Pro's battery life and sometimes force it into reboot loops. Stay away from these third-party SSD and adapters at all costs and get a genuine Apple SSD. It's worth the additional cost. Replacing the batteries is also an option. Amazon has replacement batteries for $60. That said, just like the SSD, if you purchase the battery from a third party, you run the risk of getting a lower quality product. You might again be better off searching on eBay for a genuine MacBook Pro battery. So to sum up, I would say the longevity of these laptops is great since the parts can be easily upgraded. From a processor standpoint, any of these CPU options are fine. There exists only around 8% improvement in performance between the three, but if you want the M370X GPU, then you'll want to get the 2.5 or 2.8 GHz versions. The cheapest base model 15-inch MacBook Pro available in 2019 includes the 6-core or hex-core 2.6 GHz Intel Core i7-9750H. Again, the 2019 version will set you back a whopping $2,250, but it has more cores and its performance is significantly greater. To me, the CPU performance in the 2015 MacBook Pro is just fine for what I'm doing, because the only reason why I would upgrade would be to get faster video exports in Final Cut Pro. In summary, editing is very smooth and I haven't had any problems. But if time is money for you, the 2019 base model with the Radeon 555X can export a 10-minute video in 4K in only 8 minutes with Final Cut background rendering turned off. It'll cost you nearly $2,300 though. As for RAM, the 2015 MacBook Pro 15 ships with 16 gigabytes, no less and no more. 16 gigabytes is just fine for most people in 2019. Even the $2,250 2019 15-inch MacBook Pro sold today includes only 16 gigabytes. The only difference is the 2019 MacBook Pros include slightly faster DDR4 memory instead of DDR3, and it can be upgraded. Regarding gaming, the M370X is based off of a 2012 architecture, but in my opinion, it and the 2015 MacBook Pro is the best value for gaming in a MacBook in 2019. That said, MacBook Pros were never meant for gaming, but let's run some benchmarks and do it anyways. The M370X gets an OpenCL score of 37,000. Although this is much weaker than the AMD Radeon Pro 555X's score of 46,000 included in the 2019 15-inch MacBook Pros, these new MacBooks start at $2,250. My 2015 MacBook Pro only cost me $900, so an almost tripling in cost gives us only a 23% increase in graphical performance? To put both of these scores into perspective, if you really want to game, build your own PC and throw in a GeForce GTX 1660 Ti for $300 and you'll get a Geekbench OpenCL score of 180,000, more than 4 times the performance. The Intel Iris Plus Graphics 655 included in the $1,800 2019 13-inch MacBook Pro gets an OpenCL score of 36,000, slightly less graphical performance for twice the cost. The Intel Iris Plus Graphics 645 included in the $1,300 2019 13-inch MacBook Pro gets an OpenCL score of 34,000, even less graphical performance for $400 more. Although the 2019 13-inch MacBook Pros get close to the M370X's score in the 2015 15-inch MacBook Pro, their port selection is still limited for me, their costs still aren't affordable to me, you can't upgrade anything in them, and to top it all off, their butterfly keys are flawed. Anyways, the 2015 MacBook Pro with the M370X plays games with decent frame rates, and you can expect to play last generation games on medium settings and current generation games on low settings. You can play WoW Classic just fine. The fans will kick in and become a little annoying, but in my opinion, the 2015 15-inch MacBook Pro is the best value in 2019 for raw performance in macOS than anything sold by Apple since. Would you buy a 4-year-old MacBook Pro for gaming? In conclusion, if you want the best valued MacBook Pro for raw performance, then the 2015 15-inch MacBook Pro with the M370X GPU is for you. It has one of the best trackpads and keyboards of all time. It has a multitude of ports to choose from without using dongles. It is upgradable, its screen is gorgeous, and you can do some light gaming on it too, all for the low price of approximately $900. Just remember, it lacks Thunderbolt 3, it doesn't have the same CPU for performance as the latest 6 and 8 core processors, its Final Cut Pro export times are a little longer, it is a little heavier, and the GPU performance pales in comparison to any gaming laptop. Anyways, keep a lookout for the usual videos, and I'll catch you in the next one.